There's a very specific kind of person drawn to the world of cave diving. Not just scuba diving, that's already intense, but cave diving, where people willingly crawl into pitch-black underwater tunnels, squeeze through tight rock formations barely big enough for their bodies, and do it all with heavy life support gear strapped to their backs. It's dangerous, exhausting, and unforgiving. But for those who dedicate their lives to it, it's more than a sport. It's a purpose. And sometimes it becomes a tragedy. September 29th was supposed to be the final day of an exploratory mission. Two expert divers, hardened by years of experience, were preparing for what should have been a short wrap-up dive. They were nearing the end of a multi-day operation, checking, mapping, and recording one of the most unforgiving underwater cave systems ever explored. The mission had already thrown surprises their way: tight squeezes, near-zero visibility, confusing rock structures, but so far, nothing they couldn't handle. Until that final dive, the cave was part of an old sinkhole system. Clear blue water on the surface, but once descended beyond a certain point, it turned into a twisted labyrinth of tunnels, collapsed boulders, and small, unpredictable openings. For most people, this place would look like a natural death trap. But for these divers, it was a challenge. One of them had already descended deep into the tunnel on previous dives. He had used a guideline, a thin, bright rope used to trace a path in and out of the cave, and had mapped most of the known passage. His partner was staying higher up this time, letting him finish what they came for, checking the last few restrictions, retrieving some equipment, and making sure there were no undiscovered extensions. The plan was straightforward: descend to about 165 feet, enter the tight passage, collect the line, and exit. But in caves like this, even the simplest plans can unravel fast. As the dive began, both men moved smoothly through the initial sections. The water was cold, the rocks sharp, the light limited to the beams of their headlamps. They used rebreathers, high-tech systems that recycle exhaled air, allowing for longer, quieter dives, perfect for cave environments. But rebreathers come with a catch. They require calm, steady breathing. Panic, rapid breaths, or stress can overload the system, and when that happens, the consequences can be fatal. At about 165 feet, the lead diver signaled to his partner to stop and wait. He was heading into the tightest stretch alone, just like they had agreed. His partner gave a thumbs up and hovered back, watching the faint outline of the diver disappear into the silty darkness ahead. Everything was quiet for a moment, peaceful even. Then, without warning, the partner decided to follow. It was a sudden, impulsive move, one that broke protocol but didn't seem dangerous in the moment. He was an experienced diver after all, confident, curious. He figured if he stayed close and followed the line, what could go wrong? Plenty. As he slipped into the restriction, the narrow rock tunnel immediately began to press on him. His rebreather was mounted on his back, making his profile bulkier than his partner's side mount setup, and that bulk would make all the difference. The passage narrowed quickly, too quickly. He tilted his body, trying to mimic the angle his partner had used to get through, but something caught, a protruding rock, a tight angle. The rebreather wedged in. At first, it just felt snug. That kind of pressure wasn't unusual this deep into a system, but the longer he stayed in that spot, the more it felt like the walls were closing in. He exhaled slowly and tried to slide forward again. Nothing. Just the dry, gritty scrape of aluminum on stone. He inched back a little, then stopped when he realized he couldn't tell if he was actually moving or just shifting in place. Silt began to cloud the water around him, kicked up by the slight flutter of his fins against the rocky floor. His light beam, once cutting cleanly through the tunnel, was now just a hazy glow. He tried to tuck his shoulders tighter, but the rebreather kept catching at awkward angles. Every little movement sent a dull vibration through the gear. Straps tightening, hoses shifting. Nothing felt right. His hand reached out and brushed the side of the tunnel, smooth in some places, jagged in others. He pressed his palm against the wall and gave a gentle push, hoping for even an inch of clearance. Nothing. The tunnel didn't care how careful he was. It was just stone, unmoving and absolute. A sharp edge bit into the side of his tank as he shifted again, and he stopped cold. One wrong move could rupture the rebreather. One bad turn could crack the frame. And if that happened down here, 165 feet deep, in a tunnel barely wider than his body, there would be no margin left for error. He stopped, tried to back up, no movement. He adjusted, twisted, reached with one arm, still stuck. His heart rate picked up. Breaths came faster, not yet panic, but close. The rebreather was bumping against the ceiling. He reached back to adjust, but there was no room. The walls of the tunnel pressed in from all sides. Still, he stayed calm. He knew how this worked. He'd taught this kind of escape before. Slowly, carefully, he pulled forward. Nothing. The tunnel wasn't just tight, it was unyielding. Then a sudden movement in the dark. His partner was back, reaching toward him. Their lights met. A moment of silent understanding passed between them, the kind that only happens when both people realize things have gone very, very wrong. He signaled, stuck. His partner nodded and began to help, but every push, every pull seemed to make things worse. Their bodies were too close together in the narrow tunnel, and the trapped diver's rebreather couldn't shift enough to clear the rocks. One diver reached forward and gently touched the guideline, still running along the rock. It was the only lifeline they had, a thin strip of familiarity in a place that didn't forgive mistakes. The trapped diver glanced back at the restriction, as if not quite believing he'd made it through. He gave a single nod to his partner. Time to move. No more delays. They had to get out. The partner looked shaken. He hadn't meant to follow. His gear wasn't right for the passage. His decision had nearly cost them both. His partner didn't say anything, just gestured for him to head back first. He obeyed, crawled back through the tunnel he had just escaped from, this time without incident. But then the worst thing imaginable for a cave diver happened. The guideline, the lifeline, popped out of his partner's hand. Visibility was gone. The silt stirred from their movements had turned the water into thick brown soup. There was no up or down, no sense of direction, just darkness and confusion. The diver who had just gotten stuck was now pushing ahead, still thinking he was following the line. But somewhere along the way, it had looped around his legs, then snapped free entirely. 1 second, it was in his hand. The next, gone. Panic crept in, fast breathing started again. In a rebreather, that's a killer. The faster the breathing, the more carbon dioxide builds up. If the system can't clear it fast enough, it creates a feedback loop. More CO2, more panic, more breathing, until unconsciousness. He slowed himself down, tried to regain composure, but the memory of being stuck was still fresh, and the realization that he was now directionless, in a pitch-black stone coffin, made that calm hard to hold. Somehow his partner found him again. A hand reached out from the darkness and grabbed him. Hard. Too hard. The diver was in full survival mode now, wide-eyed, flailing. He gripped his partner like a lifeline and thrashed his way forward. But instead of freedom, he wedged both of them into the tunnel. One diver facing the wall, the other pinned beneath him, being kicked in the head by desperate fins. The space was too narrow for two bodies, especially in that chaotic position. The partner below felt the sharp jabs of boot fins hitting his mask, one strike glancing off his regulator, another knocking loose the clip on his chest rig. He reached up, trying to grab a shoulder, a tank, anything that could stabilize the situation. But the panicked diver was moving too fast, too blindly. The tunnel's walls scraped against both of them, grinding into gear, arms, legs. Breathing became a problem, not because of equipment failure, but from pure, disoriented struggle. There was no rhythm, no calm, just instinct taking over, one diver trying to flee, the other trying not to be crushed. The line, somewhere in the chaos, slipped between them and out of reach. Every motion stirred more silt, turning the narrow corridor into a pulsing cloud of brown and gray. Visibility was gone. Direction was gone. It was a tangle of limbs, hoses, and rock. The partner trapped beneath braced his knees against the tunnel floor and pushed upward with all his strength, trying to create just enough space to breathe, to think. And finally, with a shift in angle and a burst of frantic energy, the panicked diver surged forward again. Not free yet, but no longer stacked on top of his only chance at survival. It was chaos. Finally, his partner managed to push up on the ceiling above, giving just enough space for the panicked diver to slip forward. He burst through the opening, but his partner fell downward into an unseen hole beneath them. Now there were two separate crises, one diver, lost, disoriented and desperate, pushing forward alone. The other, stunned, cold and missing a fin, stuck at the bottom of the cave with no guideline and a torn suit leaking freezing water into his gear. The cave didn't care how experienced they were. It didn't care how many hours they'd trained. It was just rock, cold, sharp, indifferent stone. The diver who had fallen collected himself. Slowly, methodically, he searched for a new way out. He wasn't sure where the line had gone, but he was focused now. No panic, no wasted movements, just careful searching. After several attempts through tight holes, a glimmer of hope appeared. The line above him. He grabbed it. Relief washed over. He followed it. Through another restriction, no sign of his partner. But then something made him stop. The line had gone still. That could only mean one thing. His partner was behind him, not ahead, not safe. He turned back. The path was narrow, confusing, but he traced the line backward until he saw it. A motionless body wedged in a restriction. No breathing, no movement. Equipment torn, rebreather removed. There was nothing left to do. He stayed for a moment, then turned to begin the long, cold ascent. He had hours of decompression ahead, and an impossible conversation waiting at the surface. When the team reviewed the GoPro footage later, it confirmed everything. The struggle, the decisions, the panic, and finally, the fatal mistake. The moment when the diver switched from the rebreather to the bailout tank and began breathing through a limited air supply. It wasn't enough. He ran out before anyone could reach him. This was a diver with decades of experience, a leader in the field. But none of that mattered in the final moments. Cave diving is like that. It rewards the prepared, but punishes even the smallest lapses. There's no room for ego, for impulse, for assumptions. Because when things go wrong down there, they don't just go wrong, they spiral, and sometimes they end. Even the best aren't immune to fear. When survival instincts kick in, they override training, logic, everything. Panic is the real predator in those depths. Not the cave, not the silt, not the dark. It's the mind. This tragedy became one more reminder for every cave diver who would follow. Gear matters, planning matters, calm matters. And sometimes even all of that isn't enough. But maybe the most haunting truth of all is this. Even in the most unforgiving places on Earth, the real danger isn't the place. It's what happens when you lose yourself inside it. If stories like this make your heart race, or make you want to never swim in anything darker than a hotel pool, consider following along for more intense real-life accounts like this one. And as always, respect the warnings, respect the gear, and above all, respect the cave.